Hey guys, and welcome to part two of our little mini program or course or whatever you want to call this on how to break out of survival mode. Again, we have a PDF that covers all of this. I'm basically just going through the PDF and talking through some of the ideas, as I know some people are not text based like me and like to hear someone speak about it. So, here we are. This is part two, and we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to cover what those actual 15 steps are. So, the first and foremost, and you'll hear us talk a lot about that, is basically learning how to regulate your nervous system. Now, this is one of those things that isn't just an overnight fix. Things aren't going to go from 0 to 1,000 in the first time you do some deep breathing. But what I will say is you can actually have some really good quick wins with this in terms of feeling better. And one of the things that I know was really particularly difficult for both April and I is that we were thinking negative things and therefore feeling negative things. And so one thing that was really helpful, and we were doing this before we even really knew what nervous system regulation was, because it was the pandemic, because both of us had young children, we were getting outside in nature a heck of a lot more than we normally did. And that right there started the process of regulating our nervous system, being outside, being grounded, being, running through the grass in our bare feet with our kids. My son was 2 at the time, digging through the dirt and gardening and planting and whatnot. We both started feeling better. And I remember Googling, why do I feel better when I'm outside a lot more? And I started learning about nervous system regulation. So we talked a little bit about that, obviously, in the first video. But this is the first and probably most important skill that you can learn and hopefully teach others through, practice and modeling in your life, because it is so helpful in bringing our bodies to a place where we feel safe so that we can start having more mental clarity, emotional clarity about what it is that's going on. It's basically the difference between reacting and taking a breath and responding. And so there's a lot of different practices. If you Google nervous system regulation, you can find tons of stuff. We will talk a lot about different practices that help. I particularly love um, being outside in nature, obviously, is a big one for me. I love swimming. I love being in cold water as much as possible. So, cold therapy, whether it's cold showers or even icing my face or my back, the back of my neck, which is part of the body where the vagus nerve runs through, which is really important in nervous system regulation. Which, again, if you're interested in that, we can have a lot more detailed conversations about the science of this. But ultimately, there are a ton of different regulation tactics and tools that you can use. Dancing is an amazing one. Dancing, shaking your body, is one of the most immediate regulators and nervous system reset activities that you can do. So it helps in the moment, but it's also great preventatively. So lots of stuff around regulating your nervous system. But again, at the end of the day, what this does is it takes your body from that place of stress and hypervigilance and always being on alert because you're in survival mode to a place where you are feeling safer. And so you can start thinking more clearly and more honestly about some of the emotional things or the mental things that are plaguing you that you want to work through as well. So, step one, learning how to regulate your nervous system. Step two is really activating your growth mindset. Now, this could also be step one, but to be honest, again, I couldn't get my mind straight until I got my body straight. And so, your growth mindset is basically the concept that you can learn anything with effort and time and energy, essentially. That we're not born with talent or skills, that skills can be learned and that we can grow. And this might sound like a really simple concept, but I think, a lot of the life I existed in, or the life that I've lived in, the world that I existed in, there's a lot of conditioning around creating fixed mindsets or ones where we believe you kind of are born with talent. It is what it is. You're as smart as you are, and this is all you can do, and that's that. And that, can really serve certain jobs, having people just keep themselves in their box so they are always predictable and whatnot, to not actually embracing our unique creative selves and exploring things that might not have earning potential right off the bat, based on some people's perspectives, but actually are of interest and of, passion to us. So just the idea that, right now you could learn to become an astronaut if you wanted to. It might take you 15, 20 years, but you could definitely do it. So this is the concept of growth mindset, is really learning how to activate that growth mindset. And again, I liked to think I had a growth mindset. I was always focused on lifelong learning and whatnot. So professionally, I had a growth mindset, but personally, I didn't. I kind of felt like, parenting was a big change in lifestyle for me. I never planned on becoming a parent. And then when I did, I just kind of felt like a bad parent a lot of the time. And I was like, well, I just suck. And I just, I'm going to try to get better, but I don't know if I can. Like, I think I'm just born without the mom gene kind of thing. And I used to say that to myself. And I realize now how detrimental that is to my mindset and to actually recognizing that. And I know now, because I've been working on it a lot more, that you can improve, that you can become more skilled and more comfortable in handling different kinds of situations when you put time and effort and energy into it. So it takes work, but of course, we can all grow in areas that we want to. And embracing this idea, funnily enough, is actually somewhat difficult at times for people because they kind of believe this is the lot that I was dealt in life. This is what I have to work with, as opposed to the idea that, okay, maybe I'm not great at this right now, but I can get better. So activating your growth mindset is step 2 for our 15 steps to breaking out of survival mode. Step 3 is gaining some of that clarity and what we call reawaking your authentic self, getting back in touch with who you are, with the things that light you up, with the things that give you joy, with the things that you're naturally attracted to. I had a lot of hobbies when I was a kid that I dropped as I got older because they weren't productive or they didn't, have any value to the outside world. So I have spent the last 5 years re-embracing a lot of those things, and recognizing that the value of bringing me joy is value in and of itself, and that it doesn't need to be productive to be something that I do with myself. And so I think I've spoken with a lot of people, especially, for me, motherhood did take over a lot of, my energy, my time, my attention for the first few years. And I kind of lost myself in it a little bit. And so, taking some actions to reconnect with the things that I really like, that it doesn't matter if anybody else finds use or joy or has any interest in them, in these things, but that it's something that literally feeds my spirit. These are the things that I want to be able to reconnect with and understand what they are. And I am embarrassed to say that I didn't know a lot of these. I remember saying to someone when talking about, stuff we like to do, and I was like, I don't know, I don't like stuff. And I was like, I think I do like stuff, but I don't remember what stuff I like. And so I needed to go through some activities and engage in some different exercises to reconnect with that with myself. So that was the third step. The force is really the force, actually, that's a slip of the tongue, but really the force is gratitude. The fourth step is giving and receiving appreciation or gratitude, really focusing on how to create a culture of gratitude in your life. So to give that appreciation, but also to receive it. I had to learn how to take a compliment. I would always brush things off, or, work really hard on something. And then when someone thanked me, I'd be like, oh, no big deal. It took me 2 minutes, when in fact it took me, 2 weeks to do it. And so recognizing that giving out my gratitude, but also learning how to receive that gratitude is really important in, vibrating at that abundant level, if you will. I think gratitude is something that I balked at a lot. I was like, oh yeah, I'll just be thankful for things and then I'll feel better. But actually it worked, and it, it definitely helped. One of the things that I like to do is focus on glimmers, I call it, just everything that you like that goes well in your day. You walk outside and it was supposed to be raining, but the sun's poking through, and you think, oh my God, how lucky am I? This is amazing that the sun is poking through, and now I get to walk to work instead of driving the car or taking the bus or whatever. Even, simple things that we kind of overlook, really focusing on and reveling in the joy and gratitude that you feel when those things happen. And I will say that in 3 days, when I started doing this, my perspective changed, my mindset changed. Gratitude is a force. It is one of the more powerful tools that we can engage in very simply. And, I won't say easily, because sometimes it is work to bring that into the foreground, especially when you're in survival mode and you're living in a negative mindset and you've got a lot of that negative self narrative. It can be really difficult, to, say this with feeling and say it and believe it. But I will say that it is one of the more powerful tools. And again, a simple tool that anyone can start anywhere at any time and has been deeply impactful in both April and my her healing experiences or journeys, as we're calling them. So, step 5 is really celebrating and nurturing your inner child. So, this is a really difficult space for a lot of people to work within, especially when there's been a lot of traumatic experiences that have happened inside you, right? And I heard someone talk about this and say, trauma isn't what happened to you, it's what happened inside you. It's your reaction of the experiences that you've had. And so, something could be like a Wednesday to someone else, and to you, it was a very traumatic experience. And so, recognizing that, you have to look inside yourself to be able to work through some of this is challenging, but also, really eye opening that it's not these external things that are necessarily making you feel the way that you're feeling. It's often a lot of these internal belief systems that we've created from when we were young based on experiences we had, oftentimes based on us not being able to be ourselves, having to suppress certain elements of who we are to be more palatable for others, and it resulting in feelings of shame and guilt and frustration and grief and sadness that we push down and that we ignore and that we try to forget about and present ourselves to the world in a more palatable fashion. And this can impact us drastically later on in life. So, taking some steps to connect with your inner child and to recognize the feelings that were maybe overlooked or not addressed or not even thought about, and working through some of those is, again, it was a very difficult space to exist in, especially the first time I sort of delved into this. I still do this work now, a number of years later, because, as you start peeling back the layers of the onion, so to speak, lots of stuff comes up. But it's a lot less scary now. And I feel a lot more comfortable sitting in negative, sort of vulnerable feelings of shame or frustration or grief, in a way that I know that it's not going to impact me forever, right? Once you sit through those feelings, the only way through them or past them is to go through them and not just, push them down. So, reconnecting with your inner child is definitely an important step in breaking free of survival mode. Step 6, this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, is rewiring your brain with language. I was a real shit talker to myself. I still can be at times when things are stressful. And I have a lot of tips and tricks that we'll talk about later, on how to get through this. But basically, learning to rewire your thinking with using different language, using different terms. So even to, not talk about yourself in a bad way, to say, oh God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did this. I used to say that stuff to myself daily. I'd drop a cup and be like, "You dumb motherfucker." And like, why am I saying that to myself? I would never say that to anyone else, right? Your brain doesn't know when you're kidding, when you're joking, when you're not being serious or not, right? And so the more you speak to yourself in these ways, the more your brain believes it to be true. And in fact, looks for things to confirm that, right? Confirmation bias is the idea that our brain looks for information to confirm a belief that we have, and in fact rejects information that contradicts that belief. So the more you say, ugh, I'm an idiot, the more your brain looks for information to confirm that's true, and then ignores information that in fact contradicts that and says, no, you're not an idiot. Actually, you're completely not in that realm at all. So, yeah, really learning how to rewire your brain with language and different tips and tricks, that you can do to sort of force yourself out of it at the beginning and create some new neural pathways around how you respond when stress happens or when challenges occur or things along those lines. And this can be, again, with gratitude, a really huge force in shifting the way that you feel and shifting the way that you think about the world. And in the end, shifting the way that you exist in this world. So, rewiring your brain with language, definitely a big one. Redefining success for yourself. This was actually the first thing that I did when I started moving out of survival mode. And it can definitely be something that you can do at an earlier or even a later stage throughout this process. I like it at this point because we've kind of done a lot of work to go inwards and whatnot. But this is really looking at, goal setting around what a successful life looks like to you. I lived my life pursuing, let's say, the societal standards of success. I achieved them in a lot of ways in my career, and I was so unhappy. It just didn't matter to me. And so, one of the things that I had to do when I decided to leave my career and work in a completely different way was say, well, what does success actually look like to me? What are the goals that I have? What do I want in my life? What do I want and why do I want it? And so understanding, forget about being a success, but pursuing a successful life. Those are different things to me, right? So what does living a successful life for yourself look like? This is a really important point, from, physical health and personal growth to career and finances to family and friends and physical space and, so many different things that can come into play. But what is ultimately important to you? And be specific. I was actually listening to this audiobook the other day that was saying, everyone should have as many goals as possible for themselves. Like if you can have 5,000 goals for yourself, that would be incredible. And a lot of people are like, well, what are 5,000 goals? How can I have 5,000 goals? There's so many ways that you can have 5,000 goals. I want lilies in my garden. I'd like to be able to wear clothes by this designer. I'd like to visit the Great Wall of China. I'd like to experience a 50th birthday party that, includes all of these people in my life. I'd like to drive this car. I'd like to, a lot of the time, a lot of us put goals around financial success and not, I'd like to have enough money to buy this house. Maybe just, I'd like to have this house. And why do you want this house? What would this house do for you? How would this house make you feel? These are all elements of redefining success for yourself that bring those very specific goals that you have into play in a way that isn't just about the money to buy things, but it's abundance in every area of life that you can think about. And what takes it a step further is thinking about, well, why do I want these goals? Why are they important to me? How would I feel when I accomplish these goals, right? And so I think, again, understanding what successful means to you is a really important part, because once you have clarity on some of the things that you like, it's like, think about what you want your life to look like. And I do this for like the next 30 years of my life. Like, I don't do this for the next like 2 to 5 years. It's like, over the next 30 years, here's the goals that I'd like to accomplish. I don't put a time frame down on them per se. Who's to say that I should say in a year I can do this, when maybe next month I could do this, right? And so it's having those goals, thinking about it as broadly as you can for as long of a period of time in your life as you can, and just literally writing everything down and then kind of qualifying them into different groups. And again, we can walk through sort of the exercise of how to do this for yourself, but really understanding that for you to be happy in your life, for you to feel joy, for you to feel content, for you to feel like you're aligned with your purpose, you actually have to understand what is meaningful to yourself, to you, not to your parents, not to your siblings, not to your partner, not to your kids, to you. And that, it was an exercise for me for sure. And I keep going back to it, and I keep adding to my goals, and I keep adding to things that that are, as my idea of what a successful life is changing and growing, I can continue to add to this, which has been really wonderful as well. Because you always want to be adding to your goals. Just because you achieve something, you don't want to sort of linger in that achievement. You want to continue to grow as well. So yeah, redefining success for yourself, a big piece. Identifying your fears and your limiting beliefs, and then ultimately overcoming your fears and your limiting beliefs, are step 8 and step 9. Really delving into what a limiting belief is. Again, a belief that hinders you from being your best self, from enjoying your best life, from taking actions, or even understanding that there's opportunities available to you that you might think otherwise because you have this belief. And so, having the fears of looking stupid, or people making fun of you, or trying something new and having everybody tell you it's the wrong thing to do. Like all of these fears, all of these things that hold us back from doing things that we want, from taking those aligned actions, we got to identify them, and we got to learn how to overcome some of those. And that's definitely a big piece. I still do this now. Again, peeling that onion back means that sometimes you're going to uncover things that you didn't even know were a fear or a limiting belief as you encounter a new challenge or situation. So this was definitely and continues to be a big piece of the healing experience. We focused in on imposter syndrome. So, again, basically the feeling that you're a fraud, that you're manipulating people, that you're not what people think that you are, that you don't deserve the recognition or gratitude of achievements, or your achievements aren't important to you. They're not, interesting or really meaningful. Imposter syndrome can plague most people. I don't actually think I know anyone who hasn't suffered from this in some way, professionally or personally. Like I was saying, I never planned on being a mom. Just the idea that, like, I didn't have the mom gene. I'm a fraud. Well, I have a kid. I got pregnant with him. I birthed him. Like, I'm a mom. I'm not a fraud in a mom. I might not be, the most prepared mom in the world or anything like that. But, for a long time, imposter syndrome plagued me, and professionally and personally. So, really diving deep into imposter syndrome, which really touches on your worthiness a lot of the time, again, comes down to the fact that many of us weren't allowed to be ourselves when we were kids. And that makes us feel like a fraud now because we've coached ourselves out of those intrinsic habits or desires or actions or things that we used to take. And so now we feel like a fake when we're doing anything. So imposter syndrome can be really detrimental, and it can hold you back from applying for jobs that you want, shooting your shot with that person that you think is amazing, trying something new with your kid that might be scary or unusual, all of these different things. So, imposter syndrome is a huge limiting belief, as is money mindset for a lot of people. So, shifting your money mindset and learning how to move into that abundance mindset and move away from a lack mindset was a really big piece of coming out of survival mode, and understanding what you're able to do yourself. Um, and we called it money mindset, and I feel like here we should say shifting into your abundance mindset, because again, it has so much more to do with just money, than just the finances of things. It has to do with all the things in this world that you enjoy, that you want to experience an abundance of. And so, really working to recognize some of the things that hold us back in these domains was really important as well, because I think a lot of people have a lot of limiting beliefs around money and abundance that hold them back from lots of things in life, whether it's, trying to start a side hustle while you have a full-time job because you just don't have the time, or it's never going to work, or whatever, to believing things like people who pursue money are bad, money's the root of all evil. There's lots of different messages that we have received about money growing up, and from caregivers in our lives to our own financial situations, and it is something that is important to shift into a state of have and not have not, um, to focus your energies again in terms of gratitude, and in terms of what you want to bring into your life instead of focusing on what you don't have in your life. So shifting your money mindset was a big piece as well. Building aligned community. So, one of the things that happens a lot when you're in survival mode is you disconnect from others. You feel either, you're in freeze mode and you're self isolating and you're disengaging, or you push people away with your anger, with